afternoon, this is Katie Watts. I'm going to start the webinar in just a moment. I'm just getting a couple logistical things completed on my end, so bear with me for about 30 seconds and we will get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is Katie Watts. I am with the National Center on Subsidy Innovation and Accountability, and I'm going to be presenting today to Year 2 states on getting started with the error rate review process. An hour or so ago, I did email out a copy of the slides as well as the data collection instructions to everyone who was registered. If you didn't get those and would like a copy of them, they're available in the handouts box of the GoToWebinar dashboard. If you have any trouble, accessing them, you can always send an email to me and I will make sure you get them after the webinar. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, you can either raise your hand or you can send us a message in the questions box. And just kind of depending on what is going on at that time, I can either address your question right away or we might wait till the end of the section, but I will make sure to address everything that comes in. We have 90 minutes time scheduled. I don't know if we will use that whole time, but I wanted to make sure we had it built in because there's nothing worse. As someone who does these webinars fairly often, there's nothing worse than having to rush through at the end. So I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to cover all the slides and address any questions that come in. All right, so with all of those things out of the way, I'm going to do a quick round of introductions. Again, I'm Katie Watts. I'm the error rate lead at the Subsidy Center. I have Janae Williams here with me. She is also, and she's actually the program integrity lead here at the Subsidy Center. So she's the lead of all of our program integrity technical assistants. So she's here. Mike McKenzie is also an error rate specialist. He actually could not be here today. He had something come up at the last minute. But he's here with us in spirit. And we have with us Adi Fatur and Linda Winings from the Office of Child Care Central Office. They are with the Oversight and Accountability Division. They'll be here if we get any tricky questions that come in, I will hand them over to them and stay out of it. They handle the tricky questions. And I also see on our attendee list, we have some folks from regional offices around the country. So welcome to all of you. So the purpose of today's webinar is to orient all of you to the error rate review and to walk through how to create the first 2 submissions. These first 2 submissions are the Sampling Decisions, Assurances, and Fieldwork Preparation Plan, or the Sdap, and the Customized Record Review Worksheet, or the RRW, which we usually call it for short when it's printed. So these are the 2 submissions that set you up for conducting your reviews. So we'll be walking through them in detail. Then we'll briefly touch on some next steps and how to get support as you begin your error rate review. So let's start with a brief overview. If you've been involved in the error rate review in previous cycles, this will be a refresher. For those who are new, what is the error rate review? So it's a process by which CCDF lead agencies measure eligibility errors and improper payments in their programs. Reviewers from the lead agency examine a random sample of 276 case records and look for any eligibility errors. And once you've completed all of those reviews, then you will report on your findings to us, including causes of your errors, improper payments, and your plans to reduce future errors. Each of the 50 states, plus Puerto Rico and DC, conduct the review once every 3 years on a rotational cycle. And there's 3 cohorts of states. Everyone on this call is a Year 2 state, and you'll be reporting on your error findings in June of 2024. That report is based on case records from October of 2022 through September of 2023. So that's this period that we're in right now, and that's what we refer to as the review period. So there are 6 steps to completing the error rate process. The first step is to learn about the process by reading the data collection instructions, which we also refer to as the DCI. The DCI includes all of the templates for the different submissions and instructions for completing the submissions, instructions for sampling cases, and conducting reviews. And again, that was emailed out with the slides, and it's also available in the handouts box here. Once you've familiarized yourself with the DCI, plan for the reviews by creating and submitting your sampling decisions, assurances, and fieldwork preparation plan. Then you'll customize the record review worksheet template, which is what you'll be using to conduct your case record reviews. Once the Sdap and record review worksheet have both been created and approved, you can begin conducting your reviews of the 276 case records. Then the next step is to report the results of your reviews in the final report, which we call the State Improper Payments Report, or the ACF 404. If you have an error rate, and when we say error rate, we mean percentage of improper payments, that's greater than 10%, you will be required to create and complete a corrective action plan. Throughout each of these steps, you can receive TA support from our center, from NCSIA, and we will hold several more training webinars between now and June of 2024. Today's webinar focuses on these 2 steps, creating the Sdap and customizing the record review worksheet template. Later training webinars will focus on these later steps. This slide shows the timeline for the error rate review, including the dates that the different submissions are due. Although the deadlines are still a ways off, you are welcome to begin working on your Sdap and record review worksheet submissions now. In fact, some of the Year 2 state in the cohort have already gotten started and even had their submissions already approved. So this first line displays the case review period, which I mentioned we're currently in. The last day to submit your Sdap is October 31st of 2023. And the last day to submit your customized worksheet is on December 31st of this year. The state improper payments report is submitted on or before June 30th of 2024. And if you are required to submit that corrective action plan, if your error rate exceeds 10%, that must be submitted within 60 days of the deadline for submitting the state improper payment report. All right, I just got a question in, and that question is, where can we find a list of the years and states in each year? And that is in the DCI. I don't know the exact page it's on, but I think it's in chapter 1 or 2, but it's in there. There's a list that breaks down the different cohorts, the states, and like what's the next year that each state reports in. You're welcome. At this time, we're going to dive into how to create that first required submission for the error rate review, which is the Sampling Decisions, Assurances, and Fieldwork Preparation Plan, or the Sdap. And actually, really quick before I start, I got another question. It's not a question, but Reginald Williams shared that it's actually on page 5 of the DCI. So Tara or anyone else, if you want to see that list, that's where you'd find it. Thank you. The Sdap contains your plans for sampling cases and conducting reviews. The Sdap template can be found in the DCI, but when you're ready to submit it, you don't just fill out the template in the DCI and email it to us. It must be submitted using the Online Data Collection System website, which we also call the OLDC for short. If you're new to the error rate review and will need access to the OLDC, you can contact your regional office. And if you aren't new but need a refresher on how to access it, we can help with that too. If you've used it like 3 years ago, and you'll probably need to go, like, you can probably still get in, but you'll need to reset your password. So we can help with any of that. You cannot begin sampling cases until your Sdap has been approved by the regional office. However, if you really want to get going on your submissions, you are certainly welcome to begin working on or even submitting your record review worksheet before the Sdap has been approved. Sometimes we see lead agencies submit both the Sdap and the record review worksheet at the same time, and that's acceptable. But just you cannot begin sampling until that Sdap has been approved. The Sdap consists of 3 parts, and we're going to spend the next few minutes walking through all of the items in each part, starting with sampling decisions. The first items in part 1 of the Sdap are all about selecting cases and replacement cases. In the first item, you'll share how many replacement cases you'll be drawing. We ask that you plan to select at least 3 monthly replacement cases, and you can choose more. Most states do choose about 3 per month. However, if you have reason to select like a lot of cases, more than 10, please share the reason for that. It's fine, but we just would like to know, like, if you anticipate having some issues with sampling or anything else where you might need to use more replacement cases. We would just like to get a heads up on that. You'll select the box to agree that you will obtain approval from the regional office before using any replacement cases. And then down here, clearly describe your procedures for collecting your sample. Chapter 4 of the DCI includes some more instructions on creating your response to this item. One thing that we do like to see is just mentioning that, or when you're describing your sampling procedures, be clear that the replacement cases are drawn separately from the main sample. One B asks for the name of the source of your random number generator. So when you are creating your sample and drawing your sample, you will need a random number generator. And we just want to know the name of it. You don't need to give any, you don't need to give further detail than just the name. A lot of lead agencies use the RAND function in Excel, or they might use a function in their database software, or even just a website that can generate a random number. All of those are fine. The next set of items in the Sdap is 1C, and this asks about the frequency of creating monthly sampling frames and the projected start dates. First, you'll select your frequency for collecting monthly sampling frames. So this isn't how often you'll be conducting reviews, but how often you'll be sampling cases. And if you select the box for other, you will need to describe your plans in a comments box that will appear in the OLDC. Moving down, you'll give your projected start date for sampling and the projected start date for beginning your reviews. You don't need to give us a specific date like July 1st of 2023, but please give the month. So you could just say July 2023. And remember, these are projected dates. You're not held to them. And regardless of what date is listed here, sampling cannot begin until that Sdap has been approved. Part 2 of the Sdap is assurances. I'm not going to read through all of these now, but we do ask that you read it before you click on the box to agree when you submit. Lead agencies are held responsible for compliance with these assurances, so it's important that you understand them before clicking your agreement. Now we'll move into the final part of the Sdap, which is part 3, the fieldwork preparation plan. This is the last part, but it's also the longest part. So we'll spend some time on this. First, you'll give the names, job titles, and roles of the leadership team. And to be clear, this is only asking for those who you consider to be part of the project leadership. It's not everyone who will be involved with the reviews. Share what their roles will be, and click on the box to show that you agree with the statement, that the leaders understand the program and can ensure that the timelines are met. Moving to the next item, give the name and job title for the person who will certify and submit that final report, the ACF 404 Improper Payments Report. Keep in mind that the report is submitted in June, and if you need to make any changes to it, you might need to resubmit in July. So we always like to throw this out there that if your person that's designated to certify and submit likes to go on summer vacation in late June or July, you might wish to designate a backup person who can also certify and submit. It's never a bad idea to have a backup. Three B asks for some information about your review team. And this only refers to those who will actually be going in and doing the case record reviews. You don't have to give names, but describe the size of the team and a description of how it's comprised. For example, what unit or office are the reviewers coming from, and what are their roles. So how many people are doing first level versus second level reviews, or is it going to be a mixture? We like to see things like that in the response. Three C asks about your plans for establishing inter-reviewer consistency. So you'll select the box or boxes that describe what methods you'll use to ensure consistency. You must have some re-review of cases. And we recommend a re-review of all cases with an improper payment error and at least some of the other cases. You can choose to do more. Sometimes we even see in some lead agency where every single case gets a second level review, and that's great if you have that capacity to do that. But again, we do really highly recommend at least doing that second level review of the improper payment cases. If you check the group discussion box, please be specific about how these discussions contribute to that inter-reviewer consistency. I am getting a couple messages that my voice is going in and out. So I'm going to switch to the phone. So if you want to give me a couple of seconds, I can do that. I'm sorry about that.
I'm back on my phone. Can someone maybe put in the chat or questions if they can hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. So I'm glad we built in a little extra time. I should have just gone on the phone in the first place instead of trusting computer audio. Right, if anything from this slide was unclear, if there's any questions on it, just let me know and I can always go through them again. Always go through this again. All right, so 3D in your Sdap is all about error definition. We're going to spend a little bit more time digging into this item. In the Sdap, we ask states to share how they define errors. Errors, improper payment errors, and non-payment errors. So there's actually 3 error definitions. The first for errors is general. This definition encompasses all errors that might be found in this review. And next, you'll give a definition for improper payment errors. In other words, eligibility errors that result in an improper payment. And finally, you'll give a definition for non-payment or administrative errors, or eligibility errors that do not result in an improper payment. We kind of use the term non-payment and administrative interchangeably. So just a heads up on that. I usually, especially when we're kind of just getting started with these terms, use both of them together. But if you hear one or the other, they are the same thing. In this slide, I share some examples of that first definition you'll give, and this is the general error definition. I'm not going to read through all of these right now. You can refer to this after the webinar or while writing your own Sdap. And I think there's also some other definitions, examples in the DCI. The important thing is that all of these definitions, they're all encompassing. They refer to any eligibility error that you would find in the review, regardless of whether the error results in an improper payment. I want to take a moment to give some examples of general error definitions that might not be so good. So I'm going to read this example here. This says an error refers to a misapplication of law, regulation, or policy governing the administration of CCDF grant funds that result in an improper payment to the provider. So this is not a good definition because it states that the error results in an improper payment. It's not inclusive of all the errors that might be found in the review. Here's another example. This says, any violation or misapplication of child care policies, rules, and procedures, including eligibility error, errors in payment processing, and intentional program violations from the parent or provider. This example is more general, but it's still not a good definition because it includes things that are not under the scope of this review. Remember, this review only involves eligibility errors and not errors in payment processing or intentional program violations. In this slide, we move on to some good examples of improper payment errors, which again, you can read these on your own time. But one thing you'll see in each of these definitions is that they specifically refer to improper payments or overpayments and underpayments. Sticking with improper payment error definitions, in this slide I'll show some examples of definitions that would not work. So in the top left, we have a violation or misapplication of policy or procedure governing the child care program that results in an incorrect authorization to the child care provider. So why isn't this a good definition? It's because of that last clause there where it mentions authorization. We're interested in incorrect payments, not just authorizations. So actually, if we took this definition and changed the word authorization to payment, then it would be an acceptable definition. Next, we have an improper payment error refers to any payment that should not have been made or a payment that was made in the incorrect amount due to miscalculation of income, miscalculation of cost share amount, or missing documentation. In this definition, the lead agency gave examples of what would cause the improper payment, and that's fine to do. However, it reads as if those are the only things that would lead to an improper payment. So if you do choose to give examples of error causes in your definition, just be clear that they're just examples and not an exhaustive list. So you might say something like, due to reasons included but not limited to miscalculation of income, miscalculation of cost share, etc. Also, this definition mentions missing documentation. And while missing documentation errors certainly do cause improper payments, here it makes it sound like they'll always result in improper payment. And that's not always the case. I mean, it probably varies from state to state, but often we see missing documentation errors that are non-payment errors. So again, we just don't want this definition to be too specific. Finally, this slide shows some examples of good definitions for non-payment or administrative errors. The important thing in each of these good definitions is that they specify that the error does not result in a change in the payment or an improper payment. And in this slide, I have one example of an administrative or non-payment error definition that would not be good. This says, any violation or misapplication of law, regulation, or policy governing the administration of CCDF grant funds, regardless of whether such a violation results in an improper payment. This is actually a great general error definition. So if you gave this for that first definition, that would be great. But it's too general. It does not clearly refer to only non-payment errors. Do we have any questions on error definitions? I'll stop just for a second. If anyone has anything, you can raise your hand. All right, I don't see anything, so I'll move on. At this time, we'll move away from the error definitions and back to the next part of the Sdap. 3E asks for your plans for reviewing your state policies, procedures, and processes. And first, describe your plan to ensure that the customization of your record review worksheet will use state policy in effect during the sample month. Make sure you consider whether there were or will be any policy changes during the review period. If so, you'll want to reference those here. If you submit your Sdap before the review period ends, so before September 2023, and any policy changes happen after that, you might need to update and resubmit your worksheet with those policy changes reflected. Next, describe your plan to ensure that the reviewers will consistently interpret error. Here you might want to say something about how this will be built into your reviewer training. And you can also think about your plans for ensuring ongoing inner reviewer reliability, which you would have discussed back in section 3B of the Sdap. Then in the last part of 3E, we ask you to describe how you will identify whether to apply a pooling factor in your state improper payments report. So when you are coming up with your final error measures, your findings from the reviews, there's going to be some dollar amounts involved. And we're asking you how you're going to identify or decide whether you're going to be applying a pooling factor to those amounts. So this is not a yes or no item. We're not asking whether or not you're using a pooling factor, but we would like to know where you're going to get that information. Is there a specific person or an office that provides this? What do you know about the pooling factor already? So do you know which funds are, if you do have one, you can share some information about what funds are in the pool. If you do know for sure that you don't have a pooling factor, you can say that, but we still do want to know where you would get that information from. In 3F, we ask about your information systems project responsibilities. There's a list of tasks here, and you'll be checking off those that you accomplish in partnership with IT systems and staff. If there's anything else you like to highlight, check the others box and describe. In this section that I've highlighted here, you'll describe, if any of those boxes, I'm twisting my words a little bit here. So looking above where it says other tasks describe, if any of those boxes are not checked, then you'll need to describe how those tasks are accomplished. And in the last part of 3F, describe your process to determine the annual amount of payments. This refers to all CCDF payments that were made for all children over the sample period. So share how you'll get this figure. Do you get it from a particular person or unit, or how will you pull it from a system, and so on? And again, we are not asking for that amount. Since we are still in the review period, you wouldn't have that yet, but we would just like to know your plans for pulling that because you will need it for the final report. The last part of the Sdap is 3G, case review logistics. Specifically, we would like for you to share your plans for whether electronic or physical records are reviewed, if it's going to be a mix of both, that's fine. Just describe that here. And also share how records are handled. The next item is actually new to the Sdap. We would like to know how you'll access needed documents that are stored by other entities. For example, if you receive referrals from TANF, or if your provider licensing and health and safety information is stored outside of the lead agency, how will you access that information? How will you determine that requirements are met for those cases if they're usually not in the hands of the lead agency? Okay, my animations are a little bit off on this slide, I apologize. Next, you'll share where your reviews will take place, and then describe your plans for organizing and maintaining your review files. And that brings us to the end of the Sdap. So I know I just covered a lot of items, a lot of information. If there are any questions, I will take a moment. right, I don't see anything. And of course, if you don't have any questions now, but something comes up when you're actually writing your Sdap, you are, of course, welcome to reach out to us. We are happy to help. So we're going to move away from the Sdap now and into the next required error rate submission, which is the customized record review worksheet. The Record Review Worksheet, or RRW, provides a standardized worksheet to assess the case record, to determine whether eligibility was correctly determined, and whether or not there was an improper payment. The Record Review Worksheet consists of a series of elements, each of which deals with a different area of eligibility. There's also elements to determine if there was an improper payment and a case summary element. Each element contains 4 different columns with a specific purpose for each one, except for element 500, and that only has 2 columns. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the template to show it to you, what it looks like. So for example, you can see in the Record Review Worksheet, this page shows elements 100 and 200. You can see that there's 4 columns. Scrolling down to the next page, there's some more elements, 300 through 330. This page has 340 and 350. This page has 400 and 410. This is the mid-table, which we're not going to get into that in this webinar. I think our next webinar, we dig more into kind of the nitty-gritty of completing the worksheet. We'll talk about that then. And then finally, there's a case summary element and then some paperwork reduction language down at the bottom here and the coding instructions. The Record Review Worksheet is a template, parts of which cannot be changed and parts of which are customized by the lead agency. If you are a veteran of the error rate review, if you've done this before, we just want to throw out a reminder, make sure you're always working off the most recent version of the template. Since there's always, from cycle to cycle, there's always some small changes that we make to it. The latest version, of course, can be found in the DCI. If you would like us to send you like a copy of just the Record Review Worksheet, if you want it, just the worksheet without the rest of the DCI there, we can do that in either PDF or Word formats to help you get started. Just let us know. We're happy to send that to you. You can use whatever format you would like to create your customized template and conduct your reviews. Some states use a Word document, Excel, an Access database. However, you must be able to provide a printed version of the worksheet that conforms to the template. Your customized worksheet is submitted directly to your program specialist in the regional office. It's not submitted in the OLDC system like the Sdap is. And you cannot start on your reviews until the worksheet has been approved by the regional office, until the customized worksheet has been approved. Once you've familiarized yourself with the record review worksheet and you've determined the format you'll be using to create your customized template, then you can go ahead and start with customizing it. First, when you're customizing, make sure you don't remove anything from the template, with the exception of those NAs that show up in columns 2 or 3. I'll quick show you what I mean by that. We've gotten questions on this a few times. So looking at columns 2 and 3, there's NA boxes. Those are actually just there for 508 compliance. They're not really part of our official template. So you would want to remove those when creating your customized template. But make sure you do not remove anything else. In column 1 of elements 100 through 410, underneath the boilerplate, you'll add policy citations or other requirements for the reviewers to consider when they're assessing the case record. And I'll show some examples of this in a minute. In column 2 of elements 100 through 410, you'll add items that reviewers will complete to analyze the case record. You won't be customizing anything in columns 3 or 4, or that mid-table portion, or element 500. So again, showing you the blank template. Looking at columns 3 and 4, nothing here is customized in 3 or 4. Nothing here in this mid-table is customized. And nothing in the case summary element is customized. Before I show some examples, I'll share a few general tips for customizing your worksheet template. First, make sure that the items you include in your column 2 of each element will allow the reviewers to adequately determine whether an error exists. And the reviewer should also be able to record how they determined whether an error exists. So what was verified? The next tip is to not include any items where the reviewer would be asked to record personally identifiable information of clients, children, or providers. So this would include names, birth dates, addresses, workplace names, or provider license number, anything that could potentially be tracked back or traced back to the client or child or provider. Throughout the worksheet, focus on what we call front-end eligibility processes. So we're interested in what happened during eligibility determination or redetermination. That is the scope of this error rate review. So don't include items for analyzing what took place following eligibility determination. Things like payment processing, attendance, and so on. So we call those back-end processes. The exception to this is in element 410, towards the end of the worksheet, and that's where any improper payment is calculated. Right, so I'm now going to show some examples of customizing certain elements of the record review worksheet. I'm not going to go through every element today. However, the DCI does include examples and instructions specific to each element, so you can take a look at those when you're creating your own customized template. And as I go through these, keep in mind these are just examples. Your own state's customizations are going to look different because you're basing them on your own policies and specific eligibility requirements. So let's start right here at element 100. So this slide shows the template for 100 with no customizations yet. On the top, you can see the 4 headers for the 4 different columns. And in the top left corner, this is the boilerplate. This describes what the reviewer would look for in that element. That's not going to be changed. That's kept as is. So do not remove or edit that when you're creating your customized template. Underneath the boilerplate is where you would add your policy citations or other requirements. Make sure that all of the applicable components from the boilerplate are addressed in your customization. So since element 100 is asking about required eligibility forms and assets, certificates or vouchers, the state has added policy citations for these here. We're going to stick with element 100 and move to the next part of customizing, which is column 2. Again, here you would add items to assist the reviewers in conducting a detailed analysis of the case record. Like in column 1, be sure that everything from the elements boilerplate that is applicable to your state is addressed here. In this example at the top, the lead agency has added an item asking whether there was a signed application, an item on eligibility notification, an item on asset declarations, and an item on the child care certificate. Like I mentioned a little while back, this is going to look different in your state, but hopefully this can give you kind of a general idea of what the customization might look like. A couple of things to note here in column 2. You can see that for the assets item, there's an NA box. In this state, I guess this asset item does not apply to everyone. We encourage including NA boxes if there's any items throughout your worksheet that would not apply to every scenario. Also note that there's a comments box here, and we do highly recommend including comments boxes in each element. That way the reviewer can use those boxes to record any information that's not captured by the items. Remember that column 3 is not customized, so don't add anything unless if you're like working in Microsoft Word and you want to include a text field, you can do that, but don't add any words here or anything. And finally, column 4, like you did in column 3, you can add a text field if you want, but don't customize or edit anything here. And again, in the next webinar, we'll get more into detail on how you complete the worksheet. So in case you're wondering, what all this means in column 4. We will get into that in our next webinar. So I just showed columns 1 through 4 of element 100. So this is element 200, which deals with priority group placement. Let's take a quick look at the boilerplate, determine whether client met criteria of any state-designated priority group, for example, special needs or low income. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about this element because it's one that we see it doesn't apply in many states. Many states do not have a wait list, so this element about priority group is not really relevant, or is not really applicable, I should say. If this is the case for your lead agency, we still do want you to customize column 1. You can, for example, include any policies that you do have about priorities or wait lists, even if you do not have an active wait list. For column 2 of element 200, it's the same thing. If this element does not apply in your state, we still ask that you provide some customization. You can even just include a short statement like we did here, saying that your lead agency did not have a waiting list during the review period or the sample month. Of course, if this element does apply in your state, if you do have wait lists and priority groups, then you would customize it, just like you would any other element. One important thing to keep in mind when creating your customized worksheet is to address any policy changes that might have occurred or will occur during the review period. So I'm going to show this in element 310. In this element, the reviewer determines whether the client was a resident according to state policy. And in this state, there was a policy change that occurred during the review period, and this is addressed in the customization with the effective dates of the new policy. In the case of policy changes, column 2 should also adequately address them. In this example, the lead agency has added 2 sets of questions about verification of residency requirements, with the effective dates included. So it would be very clear for a reviewer what they would need to look for, which set of questions they would need to respond to. I want to spend a bit more time, or a little bit of time, on one more element, and that's element 410. Looking at the boilerplate, this is where the reviewer is going to determine whether the eligibility workers subsidy amount is correct, and if it's not correct, was there an improper payment made to the provider? Be sure to customize column 1, just like the earlier elements. Add policies or any other instruction for reviewers on calculating authorizations, calculating payments, or determining improper payments. In column 2 of 410, we're really looking for a few specific things here, more so in the previous elements where there's a lot more flexibility in customizations. We need to see a place to record the eligibility worker subsidy amount and the reviewer subsidy amount. And there should be a place to record the difference between the two, as well as a place to record the sample month payment amount if there is a difference between the two subsidy amounts. And a comments box is always good to include too. Some lead agencies do like to add other things here, and that's perfectly fine. This is the minimum, kind of the minimum of what we want to see. I do see a question that came in from Hope Edwards, and Hope, I'm actually going to read this after the webinar, and I will email you. I want to make sure that I'm able to read this question carefully, since, like you said, it doesn't pertain to the record review worksheet, but I will definitely follow up with you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none. We do have some more time, so if you have something that you want to share, we do have a few more minutes before we sign off. I'll take this. These next few slides are on next steps. Share a couple of reminders that the last day for submitting your Sdap in the OLDC is October 31st of 2023, and you cannot begin sampling until that's been approved by the regional office. With regard to the OLDC, I know I said at the beginning of the webinar that you'll reach out to your regional office for access to the OLDC. It's not a bad idea to get that access set up sooner rather than later. You don't want to wait till October 31st, and then if there's any glitches and that can affect how soon you can get your Sdap submitted. We don't want that to happen. The last day for submitting the record review worksheet to the regional office is on December 31st, and reviews cannot begin until that has been approved. You are encouraged to send your draft to your error rate specialist, TA specialist, for review before submitting. And I will share contact information for your error rate specialist before the end of this webinar. But we can look at any drafts before you officially submit, and that usually makes the whole process for getting approved go a lot faster. A couple of questions that came in. I was asked if this is recorded, and yes, this is being recorded. If you would like access to the recording, you can email me. It eventually does get posted on our website, but there is a lag there. So if you would like access to the recording right away, just let me know and I can send you the link. Meredith, I will send you the link to this after the call is done. I'd like to confirm that no cases should be sampled for our current reporting year until or unless our Sdap and record review worksheets have been approved. So you can't sample until the Sdap has been approved. If your Sdap has been approved, but the record review worksheet is still, in review, or you haven't submitted it yet, that's fine. You can start sampling as long as that Sdap is approved. And in this slide, I just show a few resources that are available on our TA website. We have links to past webinars, and this webinar's link will eventually be up there as well. We have some briefs, some written products to help you We also have an e-learning module, and this is an overview of the entire error rate process from start to finish, and you can do that on your own time, at your own pace. We recommend this for new staff. It's really helpful. And there's some other information on there as well. In addition to the website, you can also just reach out directly to us for any technical assistance. Here's the list of the error rate specialists. We have Janae in Region 7, Mike in Region 1, and then I am the specialist in the other regions. And again, we can help with reviewing drafts, or if you just have any questions that come up. We do ask that you please copy your regional office program specialist on any email correspondence. They should always be kept in the loop. After we sign off, there will be a pop-up for an evaluation. And if you have any last-minute questions, you can ask those on there as well, and we will follow up with you. So this brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really look forward to working with all of you on this process. And I'm going to, you are welcome to sign off now. I'm going to stay on for another couple of minutes in case there are any other questions that come through. But for now, I will say, again, thank you again and goodbye. I hope you have a great rest of your week and great weekend. Take care, everyone. So the rep for Region 4 is me, Reggie Katie Watts.